Imagine a stone figure taller than a man, carved from a huge monolith and designed to look different depending on where you look at it. From the front, it stands still and confident. From the side, it seems to be walking forward. It has a human face, the body of a mighty bull, huge bird wings, and not 4, but 5 legs. This is a Lamassu. Nearly 3,000 years ago, these extraordinary creatures guarded the entrances to Assyrian palaces. They welcomed rulers, military leaders, envoys, and captives. They stood in front of throne rooms and city gates as symbols of power, protection, and divine order. Some of them survived the fall of one of the greatest empires of antiquity. They survived ruined cities, abandoned palaces, earthquakes, fires, and millennia underground. But in the 21st century, some of these stone guardians faced a threat their ancient creators could hardly have imagined. To understand their history, we must go back to the lands of ancient Mesopotamia. The area between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers is among the places where the first large cities, complex administrative systems, and early forms of writing emerged. The Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian states developed here. These civilizations did not exist simultaneously and did not constitute a single, unchanging empire. Over the millennia, different dynasties conquered cities, destroyed capitals, and built new political centers. Nevertheless, some of the religious images, written traditions, and artistic symbols were passed down from generation to generation. Among the most recognizable symbols were the giant winged creatures with human heads, which we now commonly call Lamassu. In Assyrian palaces, they were placed in pairs at the entrances. The human head symbolized reason. The body of a bull or lion represented physical strength. The wings connected the figure to the divine world. The horned crown on the head suggested the supernatural nature of the creature. Lamassu were not just decoration. In the imagination of the ancient Assyrians, they performed a protective function. Their presence was supposed to repel evil and protect the palace, the ruler, and the people who lived behind its walls. One of the most striking features of these sculptures is the 5 legs. This is not a mistake by the ancient craftsmen. It is a carefully thought-out visual effect. When one stands directly in front of the figure, one sees 2 forelegs, and the creature appears motionless. When the observer moves to the side, he sees 4 legs, positioned so that the Lamassu appears to be walking forward. The sculpture is both standing and moving. This effect shows how carefully the Assyrian craftsmen thought about the way a person would pass by the figure. The Lamassu was not intended to be viewed from just one point. It was part of an architectural experience that was meant to impress anyone approaching the royal palace. The surface of the stone shows rows of carefully sculpted feathers, muscles, hooves, bull hair, and a long beard divided into intricate curls. The eyes are wide open, and the expression is calm and commanding. Between the legs of some of the figures are carved cuneiform inscriptions. They tell of the ruler who built the palace, his power, and the lands he claimed to rule. One of the most famous Lamassu is now housed at the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures at the University of Chicago. It comes from the palace complex of the Assyrian king Sargon II at the ancient city of Dur-Sharrukin, whose remains are located near the modern settlement of Khorsabad in northern Iraq. Sargon II began construction of the new capital shortly after his accession to the throne in the 8th century BC. The city was intended to be not just an administrative center, but a monumental testament to the ruler's power. Huge walls surrounded the settlement. Inside it stood temples, administrative buildings, and a royal palace decorated with reliefs and colossal stone guardians. Construction lasted less than 2 decades. After the death of Sargon II, his successor Sennacherib moved the capital to Nineveh. Dur-Sharukin lost its political importance, and much of the city was gradually abandoned. This is important because it explains why the palace was not maintained and why its structures collapsed over time. We do not need to assume an unknown mudslide or a mysterious global catastrophe to explain the burial of the ruins. Buildings in Mesopotamia were often constructed with huge quantities of bricks. When the roofs and walls were no longer repaired, rain, wind, and time gradually turned them back into earth. The fallen bricks covered the stone reliefs and sculptures. After centuries, the former palaces could look like natural hills. This slow burial sometimes destroyed parts of the architecture, but at the same time protected other elements from erosion and human intervention. When archaeologists began to excavate Khorsabad in the 19th and 20th centuries, they found huge figures that had broken into many fragments. The cause of the damage cannot always be determined with certainty. Some sculptures were probably destroyed when the palace walls fell. Others may have been damaged during military attacks or by natural processes. After their discovery, some of the figures were carefully restored. The heavy fragments were joined together, and the missing sections were sometimes filled in so that the original image could be represented. Today, a Lamassu from the palace complex of Sargon II can be seen in Chicago. Other similar figures are in the Louvre, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Iraqi Museum in Baghdad, and in various archaeological collections. Their presence outside Iraq raises complex questions about the history of archaeology. Some of the finds were distributed through formal agreements between archaeological expeditions and the authorities governing the respective territories. Other artifacts left their countries under conditions that are now assessed much more critically. Therefore, the history of each specific sculpture must be considered separately. Not all exhibits were acquired in the same way, and it is not correct to automatically classify them as either gifts or stolen items without examining the documents. But the most difficult chapter in the modern history of Assyrian heritage began after the takeover of large parts of northern Iraq by the terrorist organization Islamic State. In 2014, the organization captured Mosul and surrounding areas. It seized control of museums, ancient cities, and archaeological sites of exceptional value. The world then saw videos showing armed men smashing sculptures with hammers and power tools. Other monuments were destroyed with heavy machinery or explosives. Among the sites affected were the Mosul Museum, parts of ancient Nineveh, and the Assyrian city of Nimrud. These sites are sometimes conflated in popular narratives, but they represent distinct sites. Khorsabad was the capital of Sargon II. Nineveh became the capital under his successor. Nimrud, known in ancient times as Kalhu, was another important Assyrian political center. In 2015, UNESCO condemned the destruction of Nimrud as part of a systematic attack on Iraq's cultural heritage. Satellite images and footage from the scene confirmed the extent of the damage. This was not random destruction carried out in a moment of battle. Monuments were selected and destroyed on camera. The footage was edited and distributed as propaganda. The reasons for this campaign are better documented than is sometimes assumed. The extremist organization portrayed the ancient images as forbidden idols. Their destruction demonstrated power over the population and the rejection of any cultural tradition that did not correspond to its own ideology. The filmed violence also had a propaganda purpose. It was designed to cause shock, fear, and international attention. There was also a financial side. Terrorist networks were involved in the illegal trade of smaller ancient objects. Artifacts that could be moved and sold had potential value on the black market. This does not mean that every missing object was necessarily sold, but looting and smuggling were a real part of the threat to cultural heritage. There is no credible evidence that the destruction of the lamas was orchestrated to conceal secret technology, unknown history or supernatural knowledge. There is also no evidence that the very existence of the five-legged ones contains a hidden message. The archaeological explanation for this feature is clear and is supported by the way the figures were placed around the entrances. However, this does not make the destruction any less disturbing. Quite the contrary. The truth is heavy enough without adding unproven conspiracies. An armed organization was deliberately destroying part of humanity's cultural memory while committing crimes against living communities in the same region. The campaign against the Yazidis in the Sinjar region was particularly brutal. International investigations have documented killings, abductions, sexual violence, enslavement, and the forced separation of families. The United Nations investigative team concluded that there were reasonable grounds to classify these acts as war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Therefore, the destruction of Assyrian monuments should not be seen in isolation. It was part of a broader campaign aimed simultaneously at the people, history, and cultural identity of the region. When a group tries to erase the past, it is not just destroying a stone, it is attacking the bond between generations. She tries to suggest that everything that existed before her is worthless, and that only her own version of the world has the right to remain. That is why the fate of the Lamassu caused such a strong reaction. These figures were created as guardians. They stood at the entrance between the outside world and the king's space. Their presence was supposed to show that the palace was protected by power, reason, and divine order. Thousands of years later, they could not physically stop the people who came with hammers, machines, and explosives, but their history was not completely erased. Archaeologists, museum specialists, historians, and local communities continue to document the damage and work to preserve the surviving sites. Modern technologies allow the creation of three-dimensional models from old photographs. Discovered fragments can be studied, and archival documents help to partially restore the appearance of the destroyed sites. None of this can completely replace the original. The scars of destruction remain, but the attempt to erase the past fails when the knowledge of it continues to be passed down. The Lamassu have lived through the rise and fall of the Assyrian Empire. Some were buried under the ruins of palaces. Others were scattered in museums around the world. Some were destroyed in front of the cameras of a terrorist organization. And yet, their image remains recognizable: a human face, a bull's body, huge wings. Five-legged, which gives the impression that the stone guardian is both standing still and moving forward. Perhaps this is the most powerful symbol of their history. Empires disappear, cities turn into ruins, palaces sink underground, monuments can be destroyed. But the past rarely disappears completely. The question is not whether the Lamas were guarding a secret, knowledge, or supernatural power. The real question is what we lose when we allow the history of humanity to be destroyed, and whether we are capable of protecting what remains before another stone guardian is forever reduced to dust. This is the story of some of the most impressive guardians ever created by human hands. A story that reminds us how fragile cultural heritage can be and how easily priceless testimonies of our past can disappear. And what is your opinion? Do you think that the destruction of these ancient monuments was dictated solely by ideology, or do you think there are other factors that history has not yet fully revealed? Share your opinion in the comments. I will read the different points of view with interest. If you want to watch more such documentary stories about UFOs and unexplained phenomena, tap on the photos that will appear above the screen. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If you found the video interesting and useful, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next documentary investigations. You will also help me a lot if you share this video with friends who are also interested in ancient civilizations, archaeological mysteries, and unexplained phenomena. Thank you once again for your support. See you soon.